I'm Talia, and I'm here with my correspondent from the world of K-12, Dami. And we have the incredible pleasure of getting to talk to you, Frank, and to learn more about the work you do as a futurist, and in particular to ask you questions and to get your perspective on what we can be thinking about, not just in the immediate as we live with and daily experience uncertainty, but about how we look ahead to rebuilding and to centering that rebuilding in a space of equity, centering on the potential of all kids and what the world can look like when we come out of this. It doesn't have to be the same world we had before, but can actually take into account and hope for the types of changes that we may have all been working toward, but not necessarily seeing as realistic in our lifetimes. So with that, I'd love to take just a minute to have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about who you are, the work you do, and why you do it. What animates and excites you about the work you get to do?
Certainly. So thank you so much, Talia and Donnie, for having me today and to get the chance to do this interview. As you said, my name is Frank Spencer, and I will tell you a very quick and funny joke. Everybody can laugh at my expense. If you guys know who Homer Simpson is on The Simpsons, and you sort of picture who he is and how he's viewed, in England, there's a long-running sitcom, a TV show, a funny show, called Mothers Do Have Them. And the main character on the show is Frank Spencer. He was a bumbling, henpecked husband. It ran for 16 years, so everybody knows this show. So when I go to London to teach or do workshops or work with companies, of course, they won't put my name on the badge because they don't want me to be the Homer Simpson of London, basically. So,
all right, so we will never forget. We will never forget your name.
Now you'll know. And the funny thing is I come from a long line of people who actually came from that part of the world. And my great-great-grandfather was a Frank Spencer. My great-grandfather was a Frank Spencer. My grandfather, and so on and so on. So I, all the way from very young, I always knew that I was very excited about what the future might hold. And when we think about the future, we think about technology mostly. And that's actually, I think, very important for our conversation today, because our technology is a good thing and it can do a lot of great things. And as a matter of fact, you guys focus a lot on STEM teachers. And so technology is very important to your constituents and your stakeholders and those you serve and those who are in your realm. But at the same time, technology is not the only thing about the future, right? As a matter of fact, actually, the future is about humans. The future is about people. And of course, our connection with the larger world and the animal world and our ecology and our planet, our climate. But I often say the future is about people, and I hear the air being sucked out of the room, because usually if I'm with technologists, what do you mean? The future is not about, you know, our wearables and the technology we have. Of course it is. But it's really about people and how they will build technology, how they'll use it, how they'll misuse it. And political systems as well, social systems, economic, environmental. So in my work as a futurist or as a foresight professional, and I actually have a master's degree in strategic foresight. And yes, you can get your master's degree and your PhD in foresight from all over the world. And it used to be for a long time that the word futurist meant some kooky person that you probably spoke at your keynote for your conference, and let's get them out of the way and get the more serious people on later. But people are starting to realize that futurist is actually a discipline and field. It's been around for a very long time. In the United States, it was really popularized by the RAND Corporation back in the 50s, 40s, and 50s. Sort of as a military effort, as everything else was. The internet was made as a military effort as well. But quickly grew to be a discipline that was looking at how do we think about the future? How do we become future-proof, but also future-empowered? And what does that really mean? Because we can't predict the future. And nobody in my field thinks that you can predict the future. You can't predict the future, I can't either. But actually we can do something better. And this is also very relevant for our conversation today, because we have thought in our world very quantitatively, very linear, very structured, afraid of uncertainty, which actually is the natural order of things. Uncertainty is not going away, it's always going to be with us. And so maybe we're supposed to be dancing with that uncertainty. And that's something I wanted to talk about a little bit today too. But because we've made those linear systems, we get ourselves in trouble the way we are now. We make these brittle, fragile systems. So we don't want to try to predict the future. We want to map it. We want to map multiple unlimited possibilities and transformations and threats, yes, but opportunities as well, and pull from all of that to empower our DNA, to empower what needs to flow, what wants to emerge, and the futures we can create, how to create the future. As a matter of fact, it's been attributed to hundreds of different people. So we'll just say it was Abraham Lincoln, such on the internet, it's a joke, you know, if you say something and then say Abraham Lincoln said it. But the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so that's what you guys are trying to do at 100,010, and everybody that's listening to this video, I'm sure is trying to do as well. Oftentimes we're not given the permission to do it purposefully and intentionally. And we need to create a new world. And I think this is a lot of what we want to talk about today. And that's what I do as a futurist, is I help corporations and I help nonprofits. And last year we got to work with the top 40 rhino conservationists in the world who are now using the field of foresight to save the rhinos. I met with all of them in Florida here. They came from around the world. So we look at all kinds of different people and help all kinds of people. And I'll tell you something else that's been on my heart, and I'll stop because I know we want to get to our next question, is we also are really down on the organizational and the corporate world, and there's a lot of good reasons for that. But at the same time, the people inside those organizations, not all of them, but many of them want to change the world too. And when we work with those people inside organizations that want to use foresight and futures thinking as a discipline, a methodology, a skill set, which it is, to do that, we're finding the ones who want to change the world. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a food production company today that we could probably blame for causing a lot of problems. But the 10 people I talked to today were all talking about better human lives and serving the underprivileged and making a better world and feeding people at no cost. This is the kinds of things they want to do. And that's the kind of work that we do with companies and corporations or organizations around the world, is to build better futures today. Because I'll say one last thing before we get to our next question. That is, the way you think about the future directly impacts the actions we take today. So futures thing is not about the future. Let's look at it and see if we got it right 10 years or 20 years from now. That's worthless. It's about changing the things we're doing today. Are we doing the right things today compared to what wants to unfold, what needs to transform? And in this environment that we're in today, we see that we need that more than ever before.
I love that. And I don't know who said you predict the future by creating it. That might have been Abraham Lincoln, but I bet he did not say that let's dance with uncertainty. And I love that. I'm gonna write that on my inner arm.
Awesome. I actually did an interview with one of the people in the field over the past 20 or 30 years that's really pushed the field forward. Peter Hayward, who used to be the director of the Master's and PhD Foresight program at Swinburne University in Australia. So that interview is going to come out in a couple of days, and it's called Dance with Complexity. It was all about my thoughts about dancing with complexity. So we can talk about that a little bit too.
I love it. So I think it's that bumbling husband in that show from England who said it, dance with uncertainty.
That's right. You'll always remember that.
I'll always remember it. I'm also really taking to note, we do think obviously a lot about science, tech, engineering, and math and STEM in general, how you give all kids the type of access to those skills, but also the inspiration and sense of agency to become problem solvers in those fields. But I love that you centered us also on the human, and that the future will, whether robots are running the factories, someone will be coding those robots, who will be creating and storing that like designing that future for us and that knowledge for us, that will always be humans. And of course, what we're seeing in the interactions, I'm losing my correspondent. Goodbye, Dami.
Goodbye.
Come put your head in.
Bye.
Bye, Donnie.
Of course, what we'll be seeing, and what we are seeing already in classrooms from schools and kids around the country, is that kids are not learning as much as they were. There's a lot of evidence that virtual learning alone leaves kids without the human interaction, the one-to-one touch, the person who's looking in and checking in on you and anchoring, tethering you to a bigger picture and bigger context. So hearing you say that this is whatever role STEM is going to have and technology will have, that it will always be human, I think really speaks to our core as an entity here, fueling teachers so that they can fuel the dreams of kids.
That's so powerful. And I couldn't agree with you more. And it says something really important and powerful. And I know one of the first questions that you wanted to ask after my short introduction, sort of was like, what are several different ideas, that we might hold on to this time to sort of make sure that in terms of the STEM teachers, the constituents, the stakeholders, those like yourself that are in community that are supporting and upholding that and doing this hard work. What are those ideas that they might gravitate during this time to? And some of what you said, it's like we cheated. It was like we were in the room together beforehand a little bit, although I'm not surprised, but we weren't, by the way, for anybody listening to this later. And so
we're in different states, friends. We're socially distancing, totally above board.
This is the ultimate socially distancing.
Apart at least.
New York, Florida, we're pretty far away from each other right now. One of the things that's really important is we are having to utilize that digital and virtual space right now. Maybe not so much virtual as digital, there's a difference between the two, but it's quickly not to be, because we were already making this transition in many ways, economically, educationally, to have to embrace the online environment, and probably in a lot of ways that many don't even realize. Maybe not the listeners of this video, because I know that they think about it a lot, but a lot of people don't realize how critical the internet and the web has become to everyday life. And so how does it continue to grow up? Because it's still in its infancy, it's nascent, how does it really grow up to become a part of our blended environment? Because that one-to-one, that human connection is so important. And how do we create a digital space that really mirrors that more? So what happened, obviously, was that we immediately were met with this, and now all of these teachers who really a lot of them haven't been skilled and upskilled to really understand how to actually deliver in the virtual world, or to be a virtual participant, who do their jobs expertly but aren't expected to try to be virtual experts, were thrown into this environment and say, hand out some sheets, get your kids to study. I mean, I know one school here in Florida that's barely even meeting with their students. They're just trying to keep their head above water. And just sending them, sheets to fill out, and you've got 30 more days, let's just get this over with and see where we land in the fall. So one of the things that really needs to happen, the first thing I want to hit on is, I'll roll back to that again in a minute for the teachers, but we have got to start taking more serious this idea of our students being digital citizens and what digital identity means. And I don't want anybody to be hearing this to be completely scared of this or think I'm talking dichotomously, because I'm not talking about them becoming digital citizens and therefore they're never in the natural or physical world, what we might consider the physical world. But what we're seeing is not a dichotomy, it's a blending of these two worlds. We've created a landscape that's only going to continue to grow. And we're going to have to take it a lot more serious that our kids, my kids, your kids, are going to learn to be these digital citizens. But right now, they've taken it very seriously, and we haven't taken it as serious. And of course, we've all heard digital natives and digital migrants and that kind of thing, but it goes far beyond that. And I want to get back to your point, because here's the main thing I would say about that. We have got multitudes of kids around the world, adults as well, but kids around the world who are in situations where they don't even have computers. They don't have access to the internet. So this is what I really mean more than anything else is, we could talk all about what it means for you and I to actually be a digital citizen, but the first step to that is access to this basic human right of the internet, where economics and learning and connection and innovation, and all kinds of terrible stuff, but as we grow up, hopefully on the net, we solve some of those problems, but it's not going away. And we have got to get these kids access to all of these basic things, and one of them also is the net. And so now we were plunged into this problem, and these kids don't even have computers. They don't have access to the internet. They don't have broadband. What is that? What is web access? What is Wi-Fi? And I'll even tell you that I worked with some leaders in my community last year who were all very unaware of the lack of access that these students have to this resource. And they would say things to me like, and this is devastating, they said, why don't they just go to McDonald's? There's Wi-Fi at McDonald's. And that's such a privileged statement. And it's so easy for us to take for granted that we have access to the net, which increasingly, and it's not going anywhere, is growing in importance. And now we see how much it's important to education in a time like this, and how we need to foster that. And that we suddenly have all of these people that don't even have a computer, much less access to the net in any way. And so we've got to take a lot more serious. And as STEM teachers, if anybody the STEM community should be all over that. They should be like, wow, this is something that we, maybe haven't gotten involved as much. I know some of them have, but maybe everybody hasn't. This has got to become a focus for us. And that's one of the things that I really would like to focus on.
I love that. What else, if you were thinking about the top 3 insights that you would want folks who are supporting teachers, students, and communities to hold front of mind right now? So the first is the digital divide didn't go away. It was there when the internet was born. It was there the dawn of the computer age, and it is still here, and we are seeing that in sharp relief right now.
That's right. And there's countries around the world that actually consider it to be, and you already heard me say, a basic human right. Finland, Japan, Spain not so long ago, all wrote in their constitution that access to the net is a basic human right, like water and air, clean air, which we sell water and we sell air nowadays too. So, ridiculous. But we have to take that a lot more seriously. So that's number one. I think the second thing, that's really on my mind is activism. And so when I say that, what I really mean is that we have got to encourage these students during this time. We got to encourage Donnie, who just walked away. It's like, it's not just about you learning rote material and all. You are our activist. And how do we take this time to, as the community of STEM teachers and the support that somebody like 100,010 gives? You built this business around being an activist, basically, right? It's an activist business in a manner of speaking. And how do we find time during this time to say, how do I become a more of an activist in my community? First, just to reach out, and these teachers, you mentioned this earlier, they're standing in the driveway with whiteboards, they're showing videos from their basement of how to do science and all. That's the kind of activism, that's the start of it. But what other things can we do that we didn't have time to do before? Because we have some time to do that now, or at least think how to remold or reframe that. And so let's become greater activists in our communities. I think, and I'll couch this in something that really bothers me, of course, as well as should bother everybody, is that teachers should be one of the highest paid professions in the world. And they're one of the lowest paid professions in the world. And I won't harp on, who we do pay these high things, because I'm not going to try to sit here and put other people down. I'm not worried about snuffing somebody else's candle out. I'm worried about lighting ours, right? And so the teachers should be the highest paid. And if they got the chance to do that, they wouldn't just be thinking about, here I am in my classroom and I'm just trying to make a curriculum and write this material. We could actually cause teachers to be embedded in our communities more as these activists that really hold the communities together. As a matter of fact, one of our clients is libraries. And right now, libraries have been going through the last 10 years a reframing. You would have thought, well, the future of libraries is nothing. They're going to die off, and we're going to have the virtuals and this kind of thing. But they have actually taken this time, librarians are brilliant, to reframe what the library means. It's a hub of the community for innovation. What a brilliant reframing. How can we even in this time redefine what a teacher means? What does it mean to be embedded as a teacher in your community? And to be that kind of activist. And then the other side of that same coin is teachers teaching kids to be activists. I read this great article the other day where it's saying, this is a time for kids to learn how to care about the environment, get involved in a political campaign, do something for other kids. I saw, a young man in Scouts the other day who invented on his 3D printer at home, a way to actually stop the doctor's mask from making these terrible lines on their face and hurting them. He's 3D printing this simple strip that stops them. And doctors are actually sending in orders to him, and he and his family are just doing it for free. But it's not just about what can they make or what they can do or how they can innovate, because we can get that as well. And it's so critical and a big part of my heart as well. But how do we teach our kids to be activists? And this is a critical part of futuring, because when we don't do that, we're not future-proofing our kids. We're not teaching them a critical part of, can I just add to STEM maybe in a way? Because I know we always do STEAM, we do the arts, and I won't have, my acronym won't fit, but I think futuring and foresight is a mental technology that needs to go right alongside science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And we have stripped that out of our schools, teaching children how to be global citizens and teaching them how to be future citizens. They are dying to tell us what the future should look like, and we give them no chance to ever do that. And so, of course, science, technology, engineering, and math is a great platform for that, but we have to stop looking at it only as a quantitative practice. It's a qualitative practice as well. And if we can mix both those sides, blend them perfectly together, then the kids want to give us visions of the future. And one thing that we lack right now, that you remember the 19th century, it's like everybody was, the 20th century is going to be amazing, vision of the future. You never hear anybody saying now, oh, the 21st century, I've got this amazing vision, we're going to go to Mars, or, you know, everybody's just sort of like, wow, the forests are burning and climate change. We need a new vision of the future. And kids are wanting to give that to us. And so we need to build curriculum in our schools, K through 12, around futuring and how to future, and allow that to be side by side with mathematics and technology and engineering. As a matter of fact, we're working with the largest public university in Dubai right now, building 4 courses for futuring that they're putting inside of their STEM curriculum and courses. And so they're requiring their STEM students to actually study foresight alongside of that study so that they know what the future will look like and how to build it. And we need that curriculum for our students.
I love that. We can call it STEMF.
STEMF, I know, I thought about that. It doesn't sound very good.
Rolls off the tongue.
We'll think of
something. STEFAM, if we include the arts and activism, the A for activism. I actually have thought a lot. I participated with my oldest daughter in the walkouts around the climate earlier this year. It's hard to believe it was just earlier this year. And I thought, why is it that kids have to walk out of school to be activists?
Right.
Like they are, we don't need to teach them. They are already impassioned about this. Like, how do we make school a place where all that comes together? And honestly, what we're seeing is that teachers want to be teaching that way.
That's right.
Teachers are desperate to create relevance and connection for their students, and we have hamstrung them. So how do we unleash all of this?
And I love that word hamstrung, and that's exactly what I was trying to get to. It's the system that's hamstrung. I know they want to be that. I see these teachers, I know many of these teachers, and they are passionate. That's why they're teaching. They're certainly not doing it for the income, but we've hamstrung them greatly. And so there's so much more that we could say about that, but I know you probably want to get some other questions.
Sure, I have 2 more if it's okay. This is so amazing. I'm so appreciative of your time and insight. I was saying earlier that one of the things that gives me hope right now is the possibility that after the flood, we make choices about how we rebuild, right? The proverbial flood, and that it has swept some things clean, and it has revealed other things that were hiding under the surface, but there was turmoil there all along. And my question for you is, how would you guide these folks, this community of activists and change makers that have come together around this goal of 100,000 excellent STEM teachers in 10 years? How would you counsel this community to think about rebuilding with equity at the center, with hope and possibility for all kids and all communities at the center?
Yeah. So we have a phrase here, and that is democratize the future. We also talk about democratizing foresight. They're a little bit different. Democratizing foresight is about helping everybody to gain the skill, the methodologies, the tools, the mental technologies to think this way. And there are ways to do that, actually, rather than just brainstorming about what might be. But I think that other side is even more important. Democratizing the future is really participatory foresight. How do we lift up and put on a pedestal what I would call the voices from the future? And so one of the things that irks me more than anything else is this campaign that's been going on for a long time about, and by the way, millennials are all in their 40s and 30s now, you know, so we act like millennials are still kids, but you know, it's very strange. But we, you know, oh, those darn millennials, you know, they're so lazy and all of this stuff and everything. One of the hardest working generations you'll ever meet. They've had to like inherit all of the garbage, and they're, you know, they do amazing. And the generation coming after them are already primed to be activists. So why are we not democratizing the future? What does that mean? That means getting those who are least heard to be the voices, and empowering them to guide us into what needs to come. And so there needs to be this concerted effort to democratize the future among the unheard voices, among the at-risk community and the underserved communities. And we can't just continue to stay in a space where only the privileged get to be the ones who speak into existence where we're going and what unfolds about the future. We've got to like have actual community practices and initiatives where we actually get that participatory voice, the voice of the unheard, the voice of the forgotten, to be the voice of the future. And I think that's so critical for us to do. STEM teachers hold a huge space to be able to do that, and to be able to, that would be their initiative. The other thing I thought about when you said that I think is so critical is we often have this idea of being able to build up multiple curves into the future or see what is emerging next while we're still in one place. So I often say to my audiences that the end result of an acorn, if you're like, oh my gosh, I have an acorn and I love my acorn and it's amazing and I'm gonna make 1,000,000 acorns. And that acorn is like, you big dummy. Inside of me is not 1,000,000 acorns, inside of me is an oak tree. And so we have to be able to see what is in our DNA. As a matter of fact, I had a great conversation with some of your team a couple of weeks ago, and we were having this same conversation, but I think it's relevant for the audience today. What wants to emerge out of our amazing basket of acorns that we have right now that we call STEM education and what we've known about it and what we've done about it up to now? By the way, there is this concept called educated incapacity. I have it, you have it, we all have it. Don't anybody be offended by this. Take this in the best possible light. Educated incapacity is knowing so much about what you know that you're really the last to know what's changing. The illusion of certainty, right? I have it too. So don't be offended by that. It just means that I need to prep myself and those voices that are unheard who are probably don't have as much educated incapacity as we have to open up these spaces for the oak tree to come out, where we just keep thinking, more acorns, I just need another acorn. If I can have 100,000 acorns, which we did need 100,000 acorns, but what in the 100,000 K, what is in your DNA next? What is the oak tree that wants to emerge? Because I heard from your team that your stakeholders were going, oh my God, you guys have done an amazing job in the last 9 years, and you're almost at your goal. So don't stop. And you're wondering, but we've almost met our goal. What's next for us? There is a next for you, because what wants to emerge is the oak tree. You've met the acorns, you created 100,000 acorns or 90,000 at this point or something like that. So what wants to emerge next? And for everybody that's listening to this, what is it that this time, this great pause, is allowing us to say, hold on, what is really in my DNA? And what needs to emerge next? I always use the example of Fujifilm as a company. They made film, they do film. They do it very well. At some point in the past, they got into x-rays and medical film, which is still film, right? But they stumbled serendipitously across the idea that the same science at the cellular level that they used to make film was also applicable for cellular medical purposes. And so they were actually able to become a big player in the field. A lot of people don't know this, but Fujifilm today is one of the top 3 regenerative medicine companies in the world. What is it 100,000 Ks, 100,000 K and 10s DNA to do next? It stems directly from what was already in your DNA. And for everybody that's listening to this, what is the DNA of STEM to become next? We still need 100,000 STEM teachers. We need more than that. We need it for it to be in the underserved community, but there's something even more. And this opportunity has given us a chance to be more than just resilient, but to embrace uncertainty, to dance with uncertainty, to be transformationalists, and to think about what to build next. Don't just try to go build the same thing or say, this is a great chance for us to build what we wanted to build and get those systems out of the way. It's something more. And I'm gonna leave that to you guys to figure that out. But I want you to have this futures thinking thought that there's something more that wants to come forth during this time, not just more of the same, not better of the same, but something new. The nature of the future is changing. It's not about just gathering more data. We've got to know what that unpredictable future is that wants to emerge. The very nature of the future itself is changing.
I'm just sitting with this vision of these acorns wanting to be oak trees, but already the oak tree was already in them. They needed us to help them with the air and the water and the soil, but it was right there all along. I actually have an acorn that my kids picked up in a recent walk, just sitting upstairs.
What's funny about you saying that is years ago when I did work with my first client, I mean, this has been a long time ago, in New York City, I was walking through Central Park, and I live in Florida. I'm originally from Georgia, so I've never lived in New York, but I picked up this huge acorn. And I don't know why, but it just really meant a lot to me that day. I know it sounds corny and silly and weird, but that acorn is still sitting right over there on my desk. And I use it as a reminder all the time of that example, that inside that acorn is a beautiful entire central park.
Right, before we finish up, I'm running to get my acorn and we're going to show each other our acorns. But before I do that, let me ask you one more question and maybe a bonus one if you have the time.
Absolutely.
Right now, so many of our partners, so many people working with and supporting teachers and schools and communities are dancing, to use your metaphor, between crisis management and planning for the day-to-day and trying to look ahead, both even a little bit ahead to the 2020-21 school year and what that's going to mean for students who are recovering from trauma and coming back together, but also to this oak tree, what is possible now that wasn't possible before. How do you counsel people, and how might you counsel us to think both about the immediate and the future?
Yep. Well, I think there's one of the things that's been really important in I think this is across all communities, but I know that my community's been talking about it a lot because, as I said earlier, and actually the name of, I don't know if I actually said this earlier in the interview, I hope I didn't. If I did, just stop me. But the name of my consulting firm was we celebrated our 10-year anniversary. So we're right on track with you guys. We started
Congratulations.
Last August, we're 10 years old. And our learning ecosystem that we created, the Future School, which houses our flagship program of training for people like yourself and STEM teachers, but students and slam poets. And every time they come together, it's this great mix. It's about 5 years old now. And the Kedge, that's the name of our firm. It's a Foresight Innovation Strategic Design firm, is a smaller anchor on a sailing vessel. That when there was no wind at sea and these large, sailing ships, the Kedge is still used today, but it doesn't have as much relevance as it used to. They would take that smaller anchor, not the big one. We know what that does. It just keeps you right where you are. That anchor has been pulled up at this point in history, I think, this time at least. So that smaller anchor, that Kedge, they would take it, no wind at sea, sails were no use to them, they're going stir crazy. They would put the Kedge in a rowboat with the newer sailors usually, because who knows what might be out in the waters. And they would row out in the direction that they wanted the ship to go, tied to a very long rope that they kept in the bottom of the ship. And everybody who was left on the ship would pull, and pull themselves in the direction they wanted to go. They might do this repeatedly until the wind came back up or they moored. But it's the thought that even if there's no wind, like there is during a time like this, or we feel like the wind is going out of our sails, that we still have the agency and the ability to pull ourselves to where we want to be, and maybe more so in some ways. We could Kedge ourselves into the future. Now, the thing I wanted to say even before that is, our firm talks a lot about building futures or avoiding futures, or the future, and how do we take actions today? Are we sure we're taking the right actions today to build us towards, hope theory that I mentioned earlier when we were talking, in terms of the agency, the pathway, and the goals. That's what really builds hope in our life. Beyond optimism, we have to have agency, we have to have pathways, and we have to have goals, and that's what hope theory is all about. But we do also, and especially my profession, needs to give people grace and a time to breathe, because we're suffering loss. We're going through that, and we can feel this sense of loss. Will students come back to school in the fall? Will that be enough time? Or will fall there be a wave 2 and a wave 3 of the COVID-19 virus? What does the future look like over the next 18 months? And we all agree, even ones who are like trying to restart the economy back up, in the next 30 days or the next 15 days, or, creating huge stimulus packages to support the old system and make sure that it doesn't go away. We know the world's not going to go back. I did an interview last night and it hit me again, right between the eyes, because the gentleman said, I want you to talk so much about the work that you've done with the Walt Disney Company and Hasbro and Lego and Daimler and Ford, but you do know that the work you did with them was in a world that doesn't exist anymore. And that really floored me. And so that doesn't mean that there's not still great lessons to learn and that work won't carry forward, but it is nonetheless in a world that doesn't exist anymore, the world that we did that work in. Still proud of it, that world doesn't exist anymore. So I think there's two things. We have to take a moment to breathe. And it's so important to do that if we're going to build transformational futures. Because if we just keep trying to run headlong into, oh my gosh, the kids don't have time to breathe. I mean, that's how we make trauma really trauma, is that we just keep trying to go on as if nothing's changed without sitting with that for a moment. and allowing that to be a part of who we are. Because I say this to our clients all the time too. The future is not bound by time and space. And when we think about the future as a time, we neglect it because I've got things to do right now. And the future is in 10 years, I'll see what happens. And when we make it a space, at least that's a little bit better because we can go, oh, in 10 years from now, will there be plants, trees, schools, water, what will work look like, post-human experience, et cetera, et cetera. That's a little bit better. But the reality is, and the poet Rainer Rilke said, the future first enters into us before it manifests itself through us. The future is an experience that we have. As a matter of fact, they've even found out scientifically that the same areas of the brain that light up when we think about nostalgia in the past and, you know, when I was a kid and the ice cream and the going to the fair, those same areas of our brain light up in when they do, you know, medical tests, but even greater when we have nostalgia for the future, when we think about what the future could be and creating the future. It's the same area of the brain, but it lights up even more when we think about the future and make the future, or have nostalgia for the future, make the future a part of what we can imagine. So it's important that we have that time to pause and have that grace, because if we don't, the future can't enter into us in order to manifest itself through us. And that's why we need to both pause and be with the moment and be present, but allow the future to enter into us in a way that it hasn't before. So we don't have used futures and dominant narratives of the future that we think that's how the future will always turn out. We have these official futures in our mind, and let this new future emerge from that space within. So both together, it's the same coin. It's not a dichotomy. We can pause and we can take a deep breath so that we can also not be resilient only or adaptive only, but transformative. Something new wants to emerge, and that's how we let it happen.
What you're describing is the way that great teachers describe what they do with kids, right? To make the space to allow the fullness of that kid, that whole self, to emerge. So I just love that guidance for us. It reminds me also of a poem. I'm forgetting the name of the poet who writes, even in Kyoto, when the cuckoo cries, I long for Kyoto.
Yes.
So that nostalgia for the future, as well as for the past, and how might we light up an aspiration for the future that's in us.
That's right.
It's a bit of a daunting task, though, to ask folks to do. And I wonder if you have any practical tips for people. In addition to taking that pause and the grace, what are some practical tips you might have for how to manifest this in the world? Because it is a lot.
It's a lot. It's like, it's swallowing, you know, I think they also say, you know, the internet is like a fire hose, like drinking from a fire hose. This feels like drinking from a fire hose too. Because right now, and especially in my field, but I think everybody's thinking this now, it's like, oh my gosh, clearly, you know, we've seen the polls over the last couple of weeks that suddenly everybody wants universal basic income, and suddenly universal healthcare looks like a smart idea. And it always was, however you want to frame that, you know, I'm not taking political sides here in this conversation. I'm just saying that, you know, if we believe life is a right, then why not continue in life being a right? And this kinds of things. So we're thinking, how do we reframe our healthcare systems? And we see that they were already brittle. How do we reframe the way governments respond? And how do we reframe what education means and how we educate these kids and such? And so all of that is going to be very different as we go forward, but there are practical steps and skills that we can have to actually do this. And so one of the things that we have to do is we have to train ourselves to think in simultaneous multiples. And that scares a lot of us. But this is a great time, as a matter of fact.
Tell us what you mean by that. What are simultaneous multiples?
Yes, absolutely. This is a great time to actually train yourself in new skills for upskilling, right? And so one of the things we can do mentally is we can start to say, I need to abandon this thought of the future being linear or being just an official future. If we think of the future from today forward being a straight line, we know that's the least likely future to emerge because there's these millions of futures off to the left and right that could emerge. And if there's more of them, then the future's not going in a straight line, even though we want it to. And we see that more than ever today. We're living in the midst of it. So thinking of simultaneous multiples means being able to train my brain to say, I could see the possibilities if we went to the left. I could see the possibilities if we went to the right. I can see plausible futures. I can see probable futures. Those are the ones that we usually deal with. I can also see many possibilities. And I can see provocative futures, very provocative futures. And those are the ones that scare us. But more than ever before, and with the speed of complexity and the volatility of our world, we've got to think more provocatively. We need to think speculatively. And then I also see those preferred futures. And again, like the acorn and the oak tree, what I thought was my preferred future, often when I start to think in these simultaneous multiples, changes. Because now we realize things we didn't know, and we see paths that we weren't imagining before, and it reframes what our preferred future even is. So thinking about plausible, possible, probable, provocative futures will reframe our preferred future. And that's thinking in simultaneous multiples. And so I would encourage everybody who's watching this today to look at maybe some even of the futuring skills. You can find all over the internet, future studies, future thinking, foresight. And there's a lot of good skills to actually take to the kids, but even to use on ourselves, how to create these ideas. And we in our field call it creating personal scenarios. Because I told you earlier that I've worked with the Walt Disney Company, and I've worked with schools, and I worked with the largest university in Dubai, and we work with the rhino conservationists. But all of those same skills are applicable to me and my life and my family. What does the future hold for us? And first and foremost, foresight, even though it's a skill, it's a discipline, there's methodologies, teams use it for strategy, innovation, etc. What I found, the people that encounter foresight or futures thinking for the first time ever in their lives, they cry. I cannot tell you how many people that I've worked with in a big company that would pull me aside in the hall and tears would come in their eyes. And I'm like, what kind of job am I in? But that's happened more times than I could possibly imagine. I was saying this to somebody yesterday, they said the same thing happened to me, one of my associates. And it's because it's the first time ever they've been given agency, or they've deconstructed the self they built when they were 15 or 16 years old. This is who you have to be, and this is what you need to do. They've never been told that they can let other parts of their self out and deconstruct that. And so we're giving them agency for the first time ever in their life. So I would encourage you to find some of these tools and to use them on yourself and to build more resiliency in your own mind to think in multiple futures. That's going to serve you so well during this time to say, here's exactly what we need to do, or here's my space, or here's the agency I have, here's the things that I can do, here's the network I'm in, here's my team. We can collaborate in the space that we're in to do something new and effective and change the world and the periphery and the space I live in.
I cannot imagine any more powerful, empowering, and fundamentally optimistic words to close us out with. We danced with uncertainty in this time. We centered on humans, even in a technological future. We imagined the two sides of grace and breath alongside future casting and action. And then this imagining of multiple futures, multiple simultaneous possibilities, some of which are probable, but some are provocative, and that they open up a space for what are preferred futures that we get to build together. I teared up when you described it, and I have chills. Thank you so much.
I want to say that your skills of recall and recollection are pretty amazing, unless you were somehow reading off a teleprompter right now. And I've been so excited to talk to you, Talia. Talking to your team has been a real treat. And I look forward to getting to know you guys even better. I was so excited to talk to you because of the amazing work that you've done, and congratulations for all that you've built with 100,000K10 and the work that you guys have done. And to everybody that's watching this video, as Talia said earlier, I know how passionate teachers are and the supporters of education and everybody that's in this field. So my hats are off to you, just like the health workers at this time. You're the heroes, you really are. And I sort of always known that, or I've known it for at least a long time. I hope more people come to realize that during this time. And that's one of the things that we don't go back to in the old world, is saying that our heroes are upside down. We need to know who the real heroes of the world are. And that's one of the changes I hope happens first and foremost. And so thank you for everybody that gets to hear this. And I wish you all the best and create better preferred futures.
This is amazing. Thank you so much. I am so grateful to your insight and your heart, your brilliant heart. Thank you.
Thank you.